Welcome everybody to another amazing episode of Faith in Marriage today. My name is Dr. Mario Sacasa, and I am flying solo today and will be for the next few episodes. I ask you please to keep in prayer Jason Angelette, who his wife Elise, that many of you know that we've been praying for on the show and throughout all of our social media channels with Faith in Marriage. We have been praying for Elise, but last week she lost her life after a 6-year battle of cancer. And so I ask you please to pray for Jason, for their family as they continue to mourn and grieve, and as they start their life anew without her around. But we are grateful for the show here at Faith in Marriage today, that we're able to continue to bring you great content, great information that will bless you and your marriage and your families, and just trying to do the best that we can to offer this service for you. So today we're going to be talking about COVID, as we have been on and off with this show over the last few months. Of course, everybody's been talking about COVID, but particularly what are the effects that we're beginning to see from a psychological perspective now that we have 6 months of research, or rather 6 months of quarantining and effects that we've been in on COVID. What is the research beginning to show about some of the lingering effects that are there, as well as talking about transitioning to school. Myself and many of us here have kids, and we're starting now going back to school for the first time since March or February, which is just ridiculous. It seems like it's been forever since school has been around. And so what does that look like, and how do we navigate the anxieties, the complexities of coming back to school, even in the midst of a pandemic? So joining me on the call today, on the show today, is Dr. Donald Songy, who is a classmate of mine from the University of Holy Cross. We graduated, got our doctorate together, and Donnie is an amazing therapist here in the New Orleans area. And so Donnie, welcome to the show. How are you doing, man?
Doing great, man. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Mario. I know this is, I think, the third shot that we've tried to connect over the last couple of days, but I'm glad we're able to get it. The way, not even a storm could stop us. So thank you for having me.
You weren't supposed to share that to the viewers. To them, it's just the first time, you know. But yes, to let everybody know, yeah, this is not. You're peeling back the curtain. You're making me look unprofessional. But you know what? The reality is, yes, this is the third time we've had to try to do this show. But we're going to get it done. And here we are. We're making it happen.
I'm already solidifying myself as a good guest. So I'm just glad.
That's exactly right. So first and foremost, how have you been during all of this? I mean, 6 months working at home. I know you made a transition a couple years ago to leave Jesuit high school and to go into private practice. I know your wife works. You guys bought a new house, I think, in Jefferson. Is that correct? And welcomed the new baby here just a few months. I mean, and then you had COVID. Just how are you doing in the midst of all this and all these amazing transitions that you're going through?
Sure. So, we just decided to pack as many major life decisions in this very short period of time. But in all seriousness, there's been a lot of silver lining to look at. I mean, obviously, this is a pandemic that I can't think of. I mean, in my practice, I've worked with people amongst different socioeconomic backgrounds and cultural backgrounds and so on and so forth. And I can't think of one client that has not been negatively impacted by this pandemic.
Sure.
So really, what I've really tried to do a lot is looking at some of the silver linings, and one of them being, we're stuck at home, but I'm able to see my daughter every single day in between breaks of seeing clients or teaching at Wake Forest. I've been able to spend a lot of time with her and seeing a lot of these milestones. And I feel like this has also been a very unique opportunity in transcending the relationship that I even have with my wife, and just this nuclear family that we have. So a lot of creative opportunities to try and strengthen our marriage, strengthen our family, even get even closer. So that's, I feel like we've been doing pretty good so far, all things considering. A lot of reading, a lot of Netflix time, a lot of writing music. Awesome. So yeah, we've been making through.
Fantastic. Well, I agree. I mean, I will say for me, again, looking at the silver linings, honestly, I've enjoyed being at home more, and now that I'm back in the office, I kind of miss being at home with the kids. It really was a blessing, being there, having that extra time with them. I know the time flies so quickly, And it's really just been a blessing to have that extra time. So great that you've been able to pick up some other things, writing some more music, that type of stuff. I picked up a little hobby myself. I've started roasting my own coffee, which is, anyways, it's crazy.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
We could spend a whole episode on that. But
we could do that for sure.
Yeah.
So thinking about then now, like we're 7 months into this, 6 months, I'm really losing track of time. What do they call it? Quarantine now is kind of the joke, that it's just every day is pretty much the same. We all live in a perpetual Groundhog Day. But we are seeing some studies coming out now that are demonstrating the increased impact on our psychological makeup. And the concern, honestly, that's present with regards to increased suicide risks, particularly. We know that during pandemics and during particularly economic recessions, suicide rates go up. That's one of the concerns that's there. Recent study from the Kaiser Family Foundation found that 45% of adults in the US are indicating some negative impact with regards to corona, which to me seems about right. I mean, you think about 50% of the people of the population, that's true. And then another one, just kind of interesting little study that I found also is that according to market research from Nielsen, sales of alcohol beverages have risen 55% in the week ending on the 21st of March 2020 compared to the 21st of March 2019. A 55% increase of alcohol beverages from 1 week to the other, 1 year to the other, I should say. And online alcohol sales have jumped 243%. So clearly we are seeing the impact of increased anxiety, increased depression, increased alcohol consumption obviously is attributed to increases of these negative psychological kind of conditions and circumstances. And so just what are you seeing in your counseling practice? What are you hearing? What are you being attentive to? What type of conversations? Obviously HIPAA, so generally speaking, but what are you finding in your practice with regards to COVID?
So, man, those statistics, just hearing them, even though it's about, it makes sense based on what I've seen out of my clients over these last 6 months, the couples, the families, and individuals I've been working with. Things that come to mind are, I would say that there have been some maybe potential predispositions of anxiety and depression or addiction or whatever have you, or marital strain that could have been toggled or maybe lubricated through distractions, sometimes through escapism with work or with school or certain activities or hobbies and so on and so forth. So that when that's taken away, when that's out of the system, not to mention the stressors of uncertainty. That's probably been the word of the year for me is uncertainty. There's just so much uncertainty. It's very difficult to plan. It's very difficult to live with this uncertainty. So I feel like it's manifested in different ways, and it especially is really taken its toll on the American family. And I think people have dealt with it in many different ways, some healthy, some unhealthy. One theme that I've noticed, especially with anxiety and depression, is how there seems to be this similar point of comparison that's perpetuated in social media that has especially pushed this movement, like you need to be your best self during a global pandemic. And that's something that I've noticed, like pressures, especially people on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, whatever have you, or just talking to others and about some woodworking project they're doing in the backyard, or they're learning Finnish, or they're just picking up some of these different things. And I think that there's this perpetual idea, like you're supposed to be handling this particular way. And the truth is this is unprecedented. So we're all trying to kind of figure this out together in many different ways. And obviously factors change, but there's just this voice in a lot of, at least the clients that I've worked with. And I think this is something I've noticed in consulting with other therapists in their heads about, you're supposed to be your best self in a pandemic. And I just don't know really how true that is or how reachable that is.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a couple great points. The first point with regards to marriage difficulties, and the word you use, distraction, kind of being able to lubricate or soften the blow some of the challenges that were there. And when those distractions aren't there, then it just, you're in on each other. The conflict is constantly there, and the distraction, the inability to get away or to do something other than argue or be around this person that's causing all this strife has certainly been exacerbated, and I think you're right on. And so certainly that is a challenge that is present there. The second piece that you spoke about with regards to the pressure to be your best self, I never thought of it that way, but I think you're right on. What do you think about that? I mean, like, why do you think that is emerging as a theme in social media?
Well, there's that's something that of an idea or theme that I've noticed a lot over social media in the past 10 to 15 years. I know that one of the things that caused me to change my outlook on digital media and social media in general was a book by Mary Aiken called The Cyber Effect. And she went into the idea of this cyber self that we have constructed and cultivated. And it's in a world that is very much sanitized, that is very much unrealistic. It's not showing us the complexities and intricate flaws of humanity. And many times it's showing us our best self, quote unquote. That's what we all kind of put out there. And at least many people that are involved in social media. And that variable, or that world and that cyber self, to me, like, where does that fit into something like a global pandemic? Where does that fit into something like us figuring out COVID-19? And how are people handling this? Because I think that was probably one of the biggest things of especially what has gone on regarding what has gone on. You see the liquor sales being jacked up. I think people are just searching for a way. Right. How am I going to cope with the stressors associated with this over the next God knows how many weeks, months, and so on and so forth. So I think they look towards those mediums, and I think they see other people that are handling, quote unquote, this in a particular way, when in reality they're seeing a sanitized version of somebody else handling.
So you think then that the best self that's emerging in this is really a perpetuation of the facade that tends to be demonstrated? Again, like, I get it. Like, I'm on social media, we put our best pictures up, we find the right filters. I know one of the biggest things even with social media is that you don't have accidental thing, even like this, like I'm stumbling over my words right now as I'm speaking. That type of stuff doesn't happen because you make sure that whatever you put out there is well curated. You edit your captions until you get them just right. And so by the time you actually hit send, whatever is said is, by and large, something that has been well crafted. And so that is the best self. That, to some degree, I understand why it needs to be there. But what I hear you saying is that you think that there's an inherent conflict that's there, where there is more of a pressure to exalt this best self of social media, or do you think that there is some, which to me sounds more like vanity, or do you feel that there is some degree of virtue that people, even in the midst of a pandemic, are genuinely trying to be their best selves?
I think that I think it may be somewhere in the between. The vanity, but also some of the virtuous pursuit of the ideal self. But the problem therein lies in terms of psychotherapy for me is, where do you leave room for self-compassion? Where do you leave room for loving kindness towards the self? And in a lot of cases, people that I found in my practice, at least, have been preoccupied with the gap between where they are and this ideal self. And then what comes after that tends to lead to like self-destructive activities or spiraling mentally. And then it leads to a lack of emotion regulation. And then that's when you start to see a lot of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the gap between where we are and where we want to be, for sure. But I think, again, going back to just specifically with COVID and the way people are responding, certainly the uncertainty, as we've already been articulating, is something that is perpetuating, like just confounding and making this thing even more so. And that's why, parentheses, I don't know if you've watched the new trailer for The Batman. I don't know if you're a superhero fan, but I watched it the last week. And even the way that they promote the movie, they just put question marks around the two. So it's question mark 2, question mark 0, question mark 2, 21. Just basically tapping into that zeitgeist of the fear, and the villain of the movie is the Riddler. So they're just tapping right into this uncertainty and the questions that we have, and in some ways it's savvy marketing. Kudos to them, tapping into the anxiety that people have with all the uncertainties that are there. But sure. Going back to just again the way people are responding and what we're seeing, to some degree, I do think that like there's something good about wanting to be your best self. And I wasn't making those comparisons to juxtapose one versus the other. I think you're right, it's somewhere in the middle. But for people to say, like, I want to be my best self even in the midst of this is really good. I mean, like, I think when you go back to marketing, I think even the whole masks thing. I know initially there weren't masks, and when masks started becoming the norm, the promotion, the way that all of the public officials promoted the masks was do good for others. Like, even if you're not a high-risk population, wear the masks for your grandmother. Wear the masks for the people in your life who have high blood pressure, the people in your life who have underlying health conditions. Wear the mask for other people. That type of marketing or message taps right into the human motivation to do good and to be good and to serve others. And that's the right attitude, is to say, okay, if you're not going to wear the mask for yourself, wear it for the people that are around you. And so make sure that you're minimizing the spread and doing your due diligence as a neighbor. I think that speaks right to, again, what we're talking about in terms of this push to want to be the best self, that in the face of uncertainty, in the face of high anxiety, in the face of high depression rates and all the things that we've been speaking about, the best option that we have is to try to be your best, even in the midst of this, and to not cave to just the anxiety and the pressures that you're feeling. What do you think, Donnie?
I agree with you. I do think that there is something, in an existential way, there is goodness in this. And borrowing from those constructivism-based philosophies of making meaning making in your life, that's something that I've found to be incredibly enriching for people, especially people who have lost so much in these last 6 months. That how do you build meaning if something's been stripped from you in terms of how you live a meaningful life, and you are embedded in just such great amounts of suffering, and you don't know when the suffering is going to end? How do you gravitate towards actions that can build meaning to punctuate the suffering that you've been facing over not just these last 6 months, but there on afterward? Actions such as generosity, or actions such as something as simple as staying up to date, being an informed citizen, and knowing what I need to do for my own end to protect the health and safety of those in my community.
Yeah, I mean, exactly right. And then it's beautiful that we have this capacity to do that. And so we have a lot of anxiety, obviously. We have a lot of depression that is emerging. What are some go-tos to help somebody navigate all these uncertainties? What are ways that people can practice self-compassion, as you spoke about, and recognizing that there is going to be mistakes that are going to be made because we're dealing in uncertain terms? There's going to be decisions that in retrospect aren't going to look like the best. How are we to coach people through this anxiety to find some meaning, but even some stability and peace, even in the midst of instability?
Mm-hmm. Well, some things that I've found is connection, staying connected with those in your life, albeit that can be a difficult task depending on where we're at, where are the numbers, and someone's capacity or the resources that they may have to build that connection. But I've definitely found, and this is something that isn't new in psychology, but to maintain some type of connectivity with the support system. If you don't have a support system, then now it's never a bad time to work on building one or refining your support system. We regulate emotions naturally in dyads anyway. Mm-hmm. That is a neurological finding that we've seen. So to do this can disrupt the spiraling. To do this can disrupt the steering into those compounding emotional experiences. We become imprisoned in desolation or despair, sorrow, sadness, or anger that can turn into rage and cause us to just feel so embedded in that. Such an easy thing. So I think it's about staying connected. I think it is understanding the anatomy of anxiety or the anatomy of depression, which I think is a very physical experience. I think that sometimes we overlook how physical that this is. So to me, it's about treating not just the mind, but also the body. So how are we taking care of our bodies? How are we trying to treat our body with compassion as well. Something as much as going outside, something as much as exercise or yoga or meditation, certain self-care activities that I think could just very much aid a person in this type of despair, so that it can mirror what we're trying to feed our brains as well. What we're trying to do in order to remove some of the negative thinking patterns that can just permeate and keep us on that feedback loop of that maintain the depression, maintain the anxiety, and so on and so forth.
Beautiful.
I think it's also about, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, but also to insulate ourselves from picking up and gathering and accumulating information and news each and every day.
Right.
That isn't necessarily a new thing regarding the pandemic, but it's been founded for quite some time. I don't think we really need a 24-hour news stream into our consciousness. And I don't think that we have been biologically created to handle those waves. And this now more so than ever is a time to limit the consumption of it. That's been recommended by the CDC. That's been recommended by WHO. It's been recommended by a lot of different organizations. The APA have pushed that. Try to create some limits in terms of how much of the information you're consuming each and every day. And also not just that, but how much are you talking about it with others? Like if you're in a chain phone call of consume some news, and then you call 5 people and have 5 same conversations, you're kind of really reliving that stressor over and over and over again. So also maybe some limits on how much you process that information as well.
Well, I appreciate you just told all of my viewers to turn off the show right now. Thanks.
Like I said, I'm inching for the #1 guest, and I'm really.
Everybody just turn the channel right now, because you're not supposed to be talking about this anyway. So why are you watching Faith and Marriage Today right now?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
thanks, Donnie. I much appreciated that. No, but you're absolutely 100% right on. Like, we need to limit the amount of consumption, and I can find that even on something as simple as the Apple News app on my iPhone, that it's a great way to get a lot of information. But sometimes I'll be scrolling on this thing and I'm like, I just feel overwhelmed by the amount of just headlines and data that I just absorbed and can't even fully process everything that I just read. And so we have to be able to limit ourselves because that absolutely is part of it. We think sometimes that more information is what's right. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes we have to know that we are as informed as we need to be, and we need to let it go, and that is okay. So you said that, which was beautiful. And just to go back with something you said a couple minutes ago, I love the way that you just kind of slyly snuck in attachment theory into the conversation without even saying it. That was great. The little drop of emotional regulation happens through dyads. Well said. That was beautiful. We know that not just in theory, but in practice, that the studies do show also that connection, human connection, is an easy, not an easy way, but it's a clear way to stave off the effects of uncertainty. Is that we find security in our relationships, and if you don't have those relationships, now is a beautiful time to begin to reestablish them. So, Donnie, we only have a couple minutes left, but I do want to talk about, just in the last few minutes that we have, about this transition back to school. Now, so many of us have our kids going back to school, and we're having to face the uncertainty, again, back to this word of running a risk of putting our kids back in school. I think your wife is a school teacher, and so what does that mean in terms of faculty at schools being now in settings that are larger with the people, more students, more people than they've been around in the last 6 months? How should people deal with this and acknowledge again, that uncertainty or the fear that's there of bringing their kids back to school? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, there's that running joke of just, this just wasn't in our marriage prep workbook.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yes.
We went through zombie apocalypse. We went through financial strain. This is new. This is just not something that we thought that we'd ever have to really face. So I think it starts with reminding ourselves that word unprecedented. This is an unprecedented feat for our family. This is not something that we felt that we would have to sit down and discuss how we would handle, but here we are. And I feel that it starts with the nuclear family. I think it starts in the immediate family, the immediate household, in terms of what are our expectations as a family in order to maintain safety and security and being able to adhere to these guidelines, because each family is different. And I mean, I've seen that especially in my practice in the wide range of families couples and individuals that I've worked with that they fall all across the spectrum in terms of what they would like to adhere to, what kind of conditions that they want to set for their families. And I think it's about starting small, starting in immediate family, and then branching out to extended family, making that the number one priority. I also find that, with entering the schools again, I think some were planned for even today, and had to pump it back until after the storm or whatever it's to face. It's a lot of the school systems are also trying to figure this out as well, and I think it's about staying up to date with what their recommendations are. I think it is about trying to create a protocol and a ritual for leaving school and entering school again, and coming home. How do you sanitize, or make it into something of normalcy? Because going back to that concept of attachment security, to me, it's about trying to facilitate this feelings of normalcy, because it's important for children to have that. The opposite of that is chaos. You can create whatever type of ritual that you want, but to stick to some type of consistency can really send a message to our kids that they are in good hands at the end of the day. And also, going back to that concept about insulating from use, we have to insulate our kids from it as well. We need to insulate them because they're living in it. They've been stuck in house for many parts since March. Sure, they socialize maybe a little bit over the summertime, but this is the first time that they're entering back into the world, and seeing just how much. I know I have a lot of clients as parents who are sitting and teaching their children safety in terms of like mask preparedness and hand sanitizing and so on and so forth. So, these are great ways to try and instruct them and equip them with those tools, but also trying to keep a cap on just how much we're processing this each and every day. And then finally, to listen to your kids.
Absolutely.
To sit with and listen to your kids, let them have a chance to process emotionally what they're going through, and validating that what they're feeling is real. It may not be healthy, it may not be helpful, but the experience of them feeling, whether it be anxiety or fear or agitation or whatever the heck have you, that it is something that they're feeling that exists to them.
Yeah, well said, Donnie. I mean, just an encouragement to parents to remind ourselves that we are, in many ways, the custodians here of our children, and we have a responsibility to set the tone in our home. So we listen to them when they're afraid. We guard them with whatever information is coming in appropriately, trying to put some of those filters with regards to the news and sources that they're getting, but then also setting the appropriate limits. Who you're going to hang out with, where are you going to go, how big is the group going to be? Having those honest conversations with our kids is really crucial during this time, as well as developing some type of normalcy and routine about what does it mean to come home, putting on the mask, sanitizing your hands, just having that routine, that ritual again. I think is all wonderful, great advice to our viewers here. So, Donnie, I really appreciate the time that you've given to us today. We have to wrap this up. We could have talked for another 20 minutes. It would have been great. But super grateful for your time. Your website is there. It's flashing on the screen. I believe it's donaldsongytherapy.com for the viewers. If they're interested in being able to access your services, they can go to that. But also, I encourage the viewers, please, to check us out at faithandmarriage.org. For more information about what we have coming up. We have some wonderful marriage retreats available, and we have a wonderful podcast called Always Hope, and some great videos on YouTube as well. And you can access all of that on faithandmarriage.org. So God bless everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we pray that you're all having a safe and wonderful day. Be good.